Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Joined by, before I get to when we're recording this, because there's a whole story there, joined by my co-host, as always, for these Monday episodes, and lately some more episodes, which hopefully will be even more as time goes by. Jeremy Cohen. Hello, Mr. Cohen.
Hello, Mr. Macri.
That was a very cordial exchange.
Thanks. Yeah. How are you?
I'm good. I was just lamenting to you that it has rained all day, and it's just, when you have kids, the rain especially sucks because it just limits all of the things that you can do to occupy your almost 5-year-old. And they are in the house with you, and they can't go anywhere, and you can't just like send them somewhere. And it's just an unfortunate turn of events. So other than that, though, I'm doing quite well. How are you?
I'm kind of feeling like death. Not gonna lie. I lucked into a Johnson & Johnson shot yesterday, and I am really feeling it. So this is my flu game. Let's bring it on. But if I sound especially delirious, there's a particular reason why. But yeah, I'm excited.
So what you're saying is I'm going to need to carry you, which is fine. I mean,
okay. Look, I didn't want to say it point blank, but then again, I thought that was kind of implicit based on every Monday episode that we've had. That's what you say anyway. But when I say it,
it's very funny.
I'm an asshole, but whatever.
What was Scotty's? I mean, Jordan had like a great line in that game. What was Scotty's line in that game? Because we all remember Scotty for helping Jordan off the court. Andrew, you want to look up what was Scotty's line in the flu game? Anyway, so I'll filibuster here for a minute, which will take up some time that Jeremy, you don't have to speak. So we a little backstory. So we're recording this. It's 5:00 on Sunday, and the Knicks play. They tip off in a little bit under 3 hours. Actually, probably a little bit over 3 hours because these games actually don't start on time. They start 15 minutes late. And Andrew, our producer, and Jeremy and me were going back and forth a few days ago with like, well, when should we record? Because Jeremy made the very good point, and I agreed with him, that like if they lose the Raptors game, it kind of changes it feels like it should change the tenor of how, we approach discussing this team. But then I was thinking about it, and I'm like, well, is that really true? And the reason why I was kind of pushing back on that is because and this is going to lead us actually into our topic today, which is why I'm going through this little story. I've been getting a lot of DMs, and I wrote about this in my newsletter on Saturday. From people, in light of some of the recent close losses where people are like, look, they're playing hard. The team has clearly turned some kind of a corner, whatever corner that is. They have turned a corner. We've gotten what we've gotten from RJ, from Quickly. Randall's obviously become a thing. Like, would it be the worst thing in the world if they just dropped a lot of close games down the stretch? Won a few, here and there, but, dropped a lot of close games down the stretch. And so we were talking about this in our group text chain, and we decided to make this the conversation for today, which is essentially how much does the rest of this season matter? But we are also splitting the baby. So you're going to hear about a half an hour's worth of discussion from us now on this and a couple other little things. And then we're actually going to record a second half of this podcast after the game. So but we're specifically going to focus on like, well, were we right? Whatever we're going to say over the next half hour, we're going to put ourselves to the test, and we're going to put ourselves on the spot, and we're going to see like, did the Raptors game have any effect? That said, if you want to hear a traditional post game, that'll show up elsewhere on your feed, as we always have been doing of late, turning the live streams into podcasts. So with that as the backdrop, Jeremy Cohen, you were the one who was like, no, if they lose to a shitty Raptors team, that's going to make a big difference. Do you, after I've given my opening statement, I guess, do you want to push back on that, or I'll throw it to you here?
I'm conflicted as well, honestly. I think that my main goal going into this year was anything goes, right? Team does well, great. Team doesn't do well, top pick awaiting their future. And then you kind of get into this area where it's like, are they going to be too good to get a good pick? Are they going to be not good enough? And, there's this kind of common thought of the worst thing in the NBA is to be mediocre, be in that middle range.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest difference is that essentially it'd be different depending on where they're at, because we're looking at a team that, whether they make the playoffs or not, is going to have around $50 million in cap space, a young player that they can build around. Another, in RJ Barrett, others,
who had a pretty good night on Saturday, we should probably say.
Pretty good. Yep. Julius Randle turning into an all-star. And I know that his last 15 or so games have overall been pretty not great, but
hold on. He's not great for what we came to expect over the first 40 games.
Right. I believe his true shooting percentage in that time is down by about 7% compared to where he was before. So it's that sort of thing where it's not great, but he was just doing so well that there's an understandable drop off. So with all that being said, this idea of kind of going crazy over these losses, shrug. Like I'm doing it, but for people who aren't watching, like,
Jeremy's actually shrugging. Right? He's shrugging as much as he can in his diminished state. Right. But I do want to. You may forget that you typed this because your head's in a vaccine-induced fog right now. But you made a good point, which is that like there do seem to be as much as our brains can process everything I just said and what you just said, and like logically we could think that at some points during a season like this, even after you've gotten over the hump that I think we agree the Knicks have gotten over based on everything we both just said, like it does seem like there are some inflection points that are more important than others. And I think there is definitely a symbolism to this game that, again, will have been played by the time you are listening to this, because if they win, they get back to 500 with exactly a quarter of the season left to go. So this is the 50. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is the 54th game of the season because, if they win, they'll be 27 and 27. And they will have I think they will have maybe not vanquished the team that has not only given them the most fits, but I think you could argue they've been the most successful team in their division for the most recent past. And I that would be really important for the Knicks to do that to the Raptors, get back to 500. On the other hand, if they lost, it would be like, again, you had this chance and you blew it, and now you're 2 games under 500, and like it's another loss against a good team, and they got lucky on Saturday night maybe to win that game. Did Memphis play their best down the stretch? And you get into all the same questions and all the same bullshit that like we have enjoyed not having to talk about. With that being said, I am of the opinion, just like you are, that there's not much that could happen for the rest of the season that would really like, unless they just can't like. So I'll give you this, and this will give us a good chance to talk about Saturday night. How they came out of the gate on Saturday was, to me, a little worrisome. Like it was the first time I felt, which is part of what made the win so great, right? Among other things, they came out of the gate not 100% ready to play. And how many times have you really been able to say that about the Knicks this year? Right. I feel like you count it on one hand. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if they did more of that moving forward, I think we'd be worried. But other than that, and I guess like, an individual player really falling off a cliff in terms of their efficiency or something like that. But other than that, like what could really happen to like, how many wins would it take for this for the positive feel of this season to completely go down the toilet?
It's tough, because here's the way I look at it. If with the schedule that's looming, and I know we've been saying that, and they're still here, around 500, so that's been great. But this idea where it almost will feel still like a lose-lose. On one hand, you either have a team that did really well in the first half and then sees a drop-off in the second half. It's like, well, I was looking for the playoffs, and now you're telling me that we have to maybe get a play-in game, which, again, I don't see Toronto getting to the 10th seed where the Knicks fall to 11th. So I think the Knicks are at the worst going to be the 10th seed in the East, which is fine, but crazier things have happened. So you really never know. Yeah. Or the other factor where it's like, if the Knicks had been losing through a lot of the first half and then started winning in the second half, They'd be killed for not sticking with the plan of like, well, we were losing, so let's just continue kind of doing that thing. And we saw that last year where the Knicks were just flat out terrible. And you have one side of fans saying like, why couldn't they just have stayed terrible? That Hawks game completely changed the outcome. Or, like at least it would have helped. You could move up in some sort of manner.
Yeah.
Again, like like that's the thing to me. And I know we'll talk about Brian Windhorst and what he had to say.
We'll get there in a second. Yeah.
But just this idea of everything is so cramped, and I feel like it's very confined to, it's like, all right, the range is basically what? 11, like 11th pick to the 18th, 17th. And I know that drastically differs, but you also have to think about the playoff factor, because again, if you have all of this money to spend and you need to, in my opinion, use it, and you need to make these upgrades, then selling free agents on the prospect of winning is probably better than being like, well, we got the 11th pick and we lost in the play-in tournament versus we made the playoffs. And even though we stunk up the joint, assuming they they get one of Philly, Brooklyn, Milwaukee or whatever, then, that's at least a compelling statement of we took this step forward.
I'm hearing you out, and just hearing you verbalize the mere possibility that they can miss the play-in. If they miss the play-in and they got a top 4 pick, that's a different story. That's a completely different animal. But again, if they miss the play-in, even if they miss the play-in, the odds of them getting a top 4 pick are still going to be at best 1 in 4, or 1 in 5, probably. Maybe they get closer to 1 in 4, depending on how some of these teams out west do in terms of like passing them. But like,
emphasis on at best, by the way,
at absolute best. Because of, and for anybody who doesn't know, it's like you either get one of your lottery combinations pulled for the top 4, otherwise you get slotted in with wherever you finish. So like there's no realistic scenario where the Knicks are going to finish any worse than like the 10th worst record in the league this year. So putting that scenario aside, if they miss the play-in, I actually do that would be devastating I think that would be devastating for the franchise. Even if I'm trying to think of like, if they got 9th or 10th and they like got blown out by, I don't know, give me a team, the Bulls, the Hornets. Like if they got blown out by one of those teams in the play-in game, and it was like, okay, so what do we just do the last 72 games? What was the purpose? Like I could see that being, I think they need to get to the play-in, and I think they need to show up, and I think they need to play a decent play-in game. I don't even think they necessarily need to win a play-in game. I think they do need to show up, and I think they need. I love how Andrew, do you want to just unmute yourself and chime in? Because you clearly want to.
Well, first of all, Jeremy, kudos to you, because this is indeed a flu game, and I have no idea how you're operating today. I had some trouble breathing after my first vaccine. You're feeling all of the effects, and just kudos to you. I don't think any of it matters, to be honest. Like the Nets and all the culture bullshit that they preached, it was off of one 40-win season and winning one playoff game. Like the Knicks, yes, if they miss the play-in and they finish 11th, that's bad, because it shows that maybe there was some fool's gold with the first half of the season. But if they make the play-in, this is a team that was expected to win 22 games. Like you've won. Like Windhorst is onto something. So with the whole that's what a successful season looks like.
You want to read?
They should. Go ahead.
Let's say what he said. Yeah, no, okay, because this is really what it comes down to. So Windhorst went on the jump this week, which I didn't see. Thank you to Andrew for. Do you watch the jump, Andrew, or do you just go
just because I run some of our social, I try to make sure if it says Knicks, I retweet it from the Knicks account, Knicks Film School account, and someone put that up. It's like, well, it's a talking point. Whether I agree with it or not is
it's a talking point.
It's a conversation,
Well, for anybody like me who didn't see this, I'll say what it is. So he made the comment that the most successful version of the Knicks season would be to lose in the play-in tournament and have a chance at a top 4 pick. Essentially, that's what he said. He thinks they've accomplished what they need to accomplish already, and now he didn't maybe say this in as many words, but it seemed to me like he was implying more losses might actually be better for them at this point, which I can't. I can't get behind that and say that it would be better. Like the notion that they would go out there tonight and lose this game, to me, just I cannot wrap my head around that being a good thing in any way, shape, or form. Jeremy, is that nuts for me to say that, or are you with me here?
I don't think it's that nuts in the sense of what is this team that would be showing up against the Knicks? It would be the Raptors. Who are some of the players who are performing at high levels for Toronto? Gary Trent Jr., drafted in the second round. Malachi Flynn, drafted in the end of the first round. Kyle Lowry, drafted in the end of the first round. Pascal Siakam, end of the first round. So this idea of, needing to get to that position. The reason that I laughed at what Windhorst was saying was because it's such a pie in the sky thing. Like, oh yeah, the best thing for them is to lose. And then like, let's say they have, and I'm looking now, we want to say they're 10th at best or the 10th worst record in the NBA. That is a 13.9% chance of going to the top 4.
Oh, okay.
So I mean,
I overstated it before. That's my fault.
No, but it's just so slim. And of course, the Lakers were the 11th, they had the 11th pick, and they skyrocketed up to the 4th.
Teams have
7th and 8th moved up, and
teams have
last
moved
year
up every
the 7th
year
moved up before
from this, range. So,
but just this idea of, they'll just lose in the play-in tournament and then they'll move up in the top 4. That's kind of like, I don't know, like your wife saying to you, John, you can have a hall pass, but the only person is going to be Jamie Lynn Spears. Like, yeah, sure, you could absolutely have that accomplished, but I'm sorry, buddy, I just don't think the odds are too good.
Okay. First of all, I don't think that highly of myself. I think I would have a chance with Jamie Lynn Spears.
I didn't say you wouldn't. I don't think it would be a 13.9% chance. The odds of you getting into the same room as Jamie Lynn Spears, making a move on her, and then successfully landing Jamie Lynn Spears in your clutches.
Listen,
I don't think it's 13.9%. I agreed. Okay. It's not zero. It's not zero. You have a chance.
It's a good thing I'm a happily married man, because otherwise I would take that as a challenge. But it's neither here nor there. Anyway, Jamie Lynn, if you're out there, again, big fan. Just want that noted for the record. Okay. I've completely lost my train of thought. Okay. So how about this? Before we move, my kid's upstairs. Before we move on to doing a little progress report, I want to ask you, I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to do this. I want to ask you a trivia question. You ready for the trivia question?
Yes.
And this, I'm going to be writing about this later this week, but I'm going to preview it right now. So there is this notion, I think, amongst people that the way you do things in the NBA traditionally, right, is it's a slow build. Apologies for that again. I don't know what my wife and hopefully it's my older daughter, not my younger one, are doing upstairs. Anyway, there's this notion that you don't make the playoffs, and then you get to a point where you make the playoffs, but you lose in the first round. And then that's a stepping stone. And then the following year, you make the playoffs again, except you win in the first round and you make it to the second or further, right? How many teams over the last 2 decades, 20 years? Okay, so we're talking about, again, four rounds in each, or rather 8. Yeah, so 4 lower seeds in each conference, or 4 first-round losers in each conference. So 8 times 20. It's a lot, okay? How many teams do you think didn't make the playoffs? And then in the next year, they made the playoffs and lost in the first round. And then the year immediately after that, they made the playoffs again and won 1 additional round at least. How many times do you think that's happened in the last 20 years?
So out of 160?
8 times 20. Yeah, so 100 out of 160.
I'm going to say that happened where they lost in the first round and then moved up the next year. The gradual improvement.
Yeah, so no playoffs. Following year, playoffs, lost in first round. Following year, playoffs, won the first round, and then lost at some point after that.
I'm going to say 70 times. Is that just way too much?
6.
Wow, that was way too much.
It's happened exactly 6 times in the last 20 years of NBA basketball. I could give you the teams actually. So and actually, a couple of them deserve an asterisk. For instance, 2009, 2010 Oklahoma City Thunder, 50 wins. They were in a three-way tie with two other teams who won 50 games. They ended up as the 8th seed, lost to the Lakers in the first round. They had not made the playoffs the year before that. I would argue that if they had been a 6 or a 7 seed, they probably would have won in the first round, right? The other asterisk, 2010, 2011 Philadelphia 76ers. That was the year they were the 8th seed. Mr. Rose tore his ACL, first round of the playoffs. So that Sixers team had made it to the first round, lost in the first round the prior year, and then because by virtue of the Rose injury, they beat the Bulls that year. So really, it's almost kind of like it's happened 4 times. And I'll tell you what those 4 times were. 2006, 2007 Orlando Magic, which is the early Dwight years. So Dwight, didn't make the playoffs, made the playoffs. And then there was a coaching change there too, which is also interesting. Stan Van Gundy replaced Brian Hill. 2007, 2008 Atlanta Hawks, our good friend Mike Woodson took the traditional path. No playoffs for a few years, more wins each time. And then 2010, 2011 Indiana Pacers, where Frank Vogel was hired in midseason. And then most recently, the 2018-19 Los Angeles Clippers, where no playoffs, scrappy team made the playoffs, and then they got Kawhi and they made it to the second round last year. That's it. So like this notion that there's this traditional path that you're supposed to take where you step by step, I think that there's maybe a little bit of falsehood to that. That said, it doesn't mean that like I think making the playoffs is a bad thing. And I'm gonna like I said, I'm gonna write on this at some point this week and get into it a little bit more. But like, I don't know, just something to think about. That's all.
Yeah. Well, we'll pretend I said 17 and not 70. But yes, I think that it's a good point. But these teams do obviously take steps moving forward. But for the Knicks, I mean, if you still track the development as we've seen it. 2018-19 season, the worst team in the NBA.
Yeah.
Following year, 1920, they were the 6th worst. This year, right now, they are the 15th worst at this very moment.
And I think they're like 13th in net rating. So you could even argue they're a little bit better than their record indicates.
Right. So there's progress. There's genuine growth.
Yeah.
And I think that there's probably no way that the Knicks are going to finish anywhere lower, as we've said, than 10th, which means that no matter what, they will have taken a step forward. And I think just looking at RJ Barrett and his strides has made that feel even more real. It doesn't feel kind of like ephemeral. It feels like an actual legitimate step forward. And same with Randall. And, I think the other thing with Randall as well, because he has not been playing to the caliber of what he is, it has created some, let's call it discourse of the idea of keeping him, paying him.
Yeah.
I get it. But at the same time, I think we have to look at the grand scheme of things, which is that if you parse out the last 15 games where it hasn't been terrible, just hasn't been great versus the games preceding that, when you look at it all together, it's a pretty damn good player, someone who is deserving of being an all-star.
Yes.
So taking that into consideration, I think the hardest part about the conversation of losing games because they're still going to get that competitive play-in experience anyway versus getting to the playoffs and potentially getting swept and dealing with the draft pick situation is we don't know what the front office's plans are in terms of this, even this summer. I mean, yes, obviously in the future, but it's hard for us to then be like, well, because of this, it changes everything. We just don't know what the setup's going to be because the Knicks are in I don't want to say unique situation because it's not unique, but they are one of a selected few by their own choosing who has affordability and flexibility to make various moves. And if they want to overpay a player, even on a 1-year deal, they can do that. They have the ability and the means to do so. Is that, going to change? Is a player going to say, well, you got swept in the first round, so I don't want to go to you versus, well, you lost in the play-in tournament, so I don't want to go to you? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's that big of a difference, and it's hard for us to determine that there is. At the end of the day, money is money. Cash rules everything around me, at least for the players. And they're still going to see a clear need, and they're going to feel wanted. They're going to say, look at this step forward that we made in our first season under Thibodeau. We can do this. We need you, and we can take that next step forward as well. Because seeing as how the 4th seed is so easy for the taking, and the teams around it they're fine, but you can spend enough and have an upgrade to the point where you are a significant, legitimate 4th seeded team. It's just a matter of if you can attract that player. Well, but that's the question. Who is that player? It's tough to say.
Well, and that gets into what you said before, which is the worst thing you could be in the NBA is a middling, mediocre team if you don't have a path out of mediocrity. And that's the key. And that's where, in addition to the nice things about the Knicks situation as it stands right now, the thing you didn't mention, but I know you're always thinking it, is they're in a major media market, right? Which is the one thing that we have never we've seen once. The Knicks be in a major media market and have a competent team. We've seen it once in the last 20 years, and a guy who was thought of as one of the 5 or 10 best players in the league at that time forced to trade here. So, I think that the end result of this is like, do I agree? Do we agree with Windhorst that it like doesn't matter at all? No, I don't think either of us agree with that. However, I think there is something to the notion of like they've already accomplished what they need to accomplish this season. And part of that seamless transition is because of how the young players have progressed. And so let's do a quick progress report here before we do a producer quarter and get out of here. So let's see. What do we want to? I just saw. So Andrew does our rundown for the show. He snuck in Ignas Brazdeikis onto the progress report because I guess it's important that we say Iggy Brazdeikis got cut from the Sixers. Okay, duly noted. Anything else, Andrew? On that?
You're welcome, Oz. I know that was 100% something you were tuning in for. So yes. Our dearly departed and potentially unemployed Ignas Brazdeikis.
But it lends some credence to the notion that, hey, maybe this front office knows what they're doing. They traded away a guy who a lot of fans were like, oh my God, how could you trade this guy away? If he just got time, he'd be the second coming. Well, maybe not. Okay. So let's save RJ for last. I'm going to start lowest on the totem pole. Obi Toppin. I thought Obi Toppin had a nice week. And I thought, in particular, Obi Toppin had a nice night on Saturday. I'm not going to say too much on him because I have a big Obi section in Monday's newsletter. But I think it's encouraging that he looks like a basketball player again, and I think a lot of that has to do with Derrick Rose. And I'm actually genuinely excited to see the rest of Obi Toppin's rookie year, which is not something I think I would have said at any point in like the last, I don't know, month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah, I was going to say, Derrick Rose absolutely is the key in so many ways to unlocking him. I think as well, if Randall's going to struggle, and we saw this especially in the Grizzlies game where Randall was in early foul trouble, which brought Obi into the first quarter for what felt like, I don't want to say it was the first time all season, but it kind of felt like it. It's very possible he got in there earlier in other games. But
I will say, I went and looked it up. The 15 minutes he played, or there have been games where he's played more than 15 minutes over the last couple months. But if you look at them, they were all games that were out of hand one way or another. This is the most he's played in a game where it's like it was a close game throughout since late January. So, and he held his own. I didn't think he looked out of place.
Yeah, he absolutely did. But I agree. It's a sort of thing where, especially when you're spending the 8th pick on a player and they're a little bit on the older side and you're seeing all these other guys take steps forward and you're thinking, well, why can't it be this guy, especially with the idea of nepotism and training and everything that went on in the pre-draft scenario, that wanting him to prosper is something to absolutely look forward to. And a lot of times he feels like an afterthought because things are going well. And it's not like the sky is falling. And it's like, my God, Obi Toppin is on top of all of this, like looking like crap. And he's not. He's starting to show signs of life. And he's been a late bloomer pretty much everywhere he's gone. So it's great that he's finally showing some signs of growth. And as you said, I'm really eager to see how he finishes the rest of the season.
And one more thing on that, I think it's helped that like the guy that, like there's always a guy that we passed on, right? And the guy in this instance that we passed on is Tyrese Halliburton. We got another guy that plays Halliburton's position, different sort of player. But the fact that we got quickly, I think dulls that or blunts the pain or whatever. In addition, as opposed to with Kevin Knox and Michael Porter Jr., who like essentially they're exactly the same profile of player, except one is really good and the other is Kevin Knox.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to add something, Jeremy? Or?
Well, I was just thinking in terms of Halliburton, he's really playing in an off-ball role. He's a secondary ball handler.
And he's not – this isn't Donovan Mitchell that they passed on.
No. Right. And so there's this idea of having or passing on Halliburton being like, well, you still could have had – look, again, Halliburton does nothing to solve what I think is the most important issue that the Knicks have, which is not having a solid half-court creator and facilitator at the point.
100%.
And he's not going to fix that. And so you're just basically having someone in a different role, basically in the quickly role. Again, you don't need two of those guys, especially when you have Reggie Bullock playing well. So you can, and the other context, of course, is that with Obi and with Randall did not look like Randall. Randall looked like most of last 15 games, Randall. And that was on a good night last year in a lot of ways. So when you consider what Randall was and what he is now, obviously the Obi pick, I can understand that people feel it's a mistake, especially when we see other talent around that range. But again, the context was just completely different at the time. And there's still time for that book to be written. We're in chapter 1 of what should hopefully be a 10+ year career for the guy.
There's a ton of time, and I feel okay saying that. And I know I probably said that about Kevin Knox once upon a time. I think Obi might be a little bit different. Quickly, I don't think we need to talk about Quickly a lot, other than the fact that like he needed a good game, and more importantly, the Knicks needed a good game from him. You want another? I'm spoiling my column left and right here. You want another fun stat on Emmanuel Quickly?
Give it to me.
There you go. So let me find it. Of course. Okay. So Emmanuel Quickly, in games where Emmanuel Quickly shoots at least 40% from the field, what do you think the Knicks? It's 21 games. What do you think the Knicks record is in those 21 games?
When he shoots at least 40% from the field?
40%.
21 games. I'm going to say 13-8.
They're 15-6. When Emmanuel Quickly hits a third or fewer of his shots, so this is inclusive of games where he shoots 33%. Again, 22 of those games. What do you think their record is in those games?
Where he hits under what?
A third or fewer. So he does not hit more than a third of his shots.
And it's 22.
22, yeah.
I'm going to say 6-16.
Exactly. They're 6-16. So, and there's other stats like that. I think I quoted one last week about when he hits double figures. There's, stats of him like hitting 3. He is just, again, Julius Randle's their most important player. I don't think there's any disputing that. But like at the same time, Julius Randle had a shitty game the other night. I know he had a triple-double. He did not have a good game, and they won that game. And I think Quickly getting 20, and I know, and good transition to RJ, had a lot to do with it, but save the best for last, so we'll end on this. RJ Barrett, it's interesting. I went on Chip Murphy's show yesterday. I think the pod dropped today, and what they wanted to talk about was like RJ getting disrespected by the ESPN list and like general disrespect. And I feel like that's been a point of conversation on the live streams and like on Twitter. I'm like, I don't know, maybe just because I'm so focused on what I focus on, which is similar to what you focus on. I don't care about that's not a narrative I'm interested in. I don't give a shit about it. I just want to see him play well and help them win games. And boy, did he help them win that game. And that was just, I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what it sounds like. I don't care what it smells like. He is helping them win basketball games, which is just awesome to see. So yeah.
Yeah. Again, I mean, with ESPN, we're doing exactly what they want. The fact is that
we're fucking talking about it.
Right. They came up with a list that they know is clearly flawed.
Still didn't get my click, motherfucker, by the way, if you're out there.
Me neither.
The man.
Thank you for those who compiled the list before. But no, they took this and they put LaMelo Ball third, for example. And then Stephen A used that as a way to talk about it on First Take. And they've just completely, gone on a launching pad and all these other fans bringing attention to it. And that's why I really didn't want to talk about it, because it was just bringing more attention to it. I think we can all agree that he is a top player under 25, at least at, one of the 25 best. I would certainly put him ahead of, I don't know, like Jared Allen, for example. Yeah. But I think the other factor here is a lot of those players that they listed are guys who are already on their second contract. So if your prime is around 26, 27 years old, then you're comparing someone who is already like been in the league for maybe 5 to 6 years versus players who are like not even halfway through their rookie deals. So, again, he's been magnificent, especially in the last 3 games. I mean, he really turned it on in the fourth quarter and overtime. Was sluggish, at least in the Memphis game. He was sluggish in the first half, but I think
as was everybody in the game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think
except
the other
Derrick
thing,
Rose.
Right. And yes. And the other thing with RJ is really, he's showing he can be clutch, and that is something that Randall's really not doing. And there's going to come a certain point where, and I know they did it in the Miami game, where he missed the layup, and Miami won, but where they used Randall as a decoy, and then they had RJ cut to the rim. At a certain point, teams are going to get smart enough to be like, no, RJ is going to be their primary guy right now when things matter most. But there's another great article that came out today. Actually, I can't remember the exact source of it, but it was in somewhat of an interview with Drew Hanlon, who basically was talking about ways that they want to improve. And RJ wrote Hanlon and said, come down to Florida, Montverde for 35 days. And let's just go over this. We'll be near the bubble, but no one was going to be there. And just a time to focus on. And what was so beneficial to this development was there was no rush. There was no, we have to get this down pat because the NBA offseason is on the shorter side. Mm-hmm. And then when you consider the fact that the Olympics are coming up and RJ is most likely going to play for Team Canada, and the windows that the Knicks have, there's just not going to be a whole lot of time. And that's why they've set up a multi-year plan for how RJ can improve, which as a Knicks fan, you love to hear that, because basically what Hanlon was saying was, we don't really want RJ to just kind of be a master of none for a lot of these different things. We want him to focus on like pull-up jumpers next year. And then after that, we can do other things. And there's a plan in place. And with RJ's work ethic, it's wonderful to see that. So, I mean, that's I think the other thing. When we see these close losses, I don't look at them as like these mercenary vets just screwing things up. I look at it as these are opportunities for RJ Barrett in the clutch when the game is on the line to get that experience. And this idea of having other high usage players just for the sake of being high usage around him, who would be taking the ball out of his hands when you want him to have the ball and to grow as a player when it really matters. That's what's so important to me, and something to consider moving forward for next year and the year after. And in general, when you put pieces around RJ Barrett,
there's no world where this team moving forward does not feature RJ Barrett in a prominent way. Like there's no world where they'll it's funny that I'm going to invoke the name of this player. Shout out to Trini Poo. There's no way where RJ Barrett gets like Karis LeVerted, right? And he becomes like an ancillary, somewhat expendable piece. Like that's not happening. So that is very exciting. I think you said, the thing about working on in the offseason, who was it like? I feel like it was Kobe, LeBron, or maybe all these great players. Like they pick one or two things to work on each offseason. Like it feels like that's a thing that really great players do. So to hear that he's doing it is awesome.
5 hours later.
All right, and we're back. We are back. It is 11:20 p.m. in the evening, as it were, with the PM. The Knicks have won a thrilling game. I'm still coming down from floating a little bit off the floor off of that win, as I'm sure we all are. If you want to hear the full thoughts on the game itself, check out your stream right now. You should already see the post-game live stream in podcast form. But before we get to a very quick wrap up on our conversation that we had just a little while ago, Jeremy Cohen, thoughts on the win?
Fantastic. I mean, you obviously would hope that it wouldn't be nearly as close as it was.
You would.
That third quarter certainly got dicey, and the Knicks have just been completely anemic in fourth quarters recently, the first half of the fourth quarters.
Yep.
Derrick Rose not, I think, being back to his usual self is really hurting the team to the point where offense is just really hard to come by. So, yeah, I mean, the Gary Trent Jr. and Siakam did a fantastic job of bringing Toronto back. Yeah. I feel like that Flynn turnover.
Huge. Massive.
But it felt like a nice also. It felt like karma for when Bullock stepped on the line. And obviously he didn't make that shot, but still, I mean.
We got jobbed by the refs a few other times tonight. So I think everything works out in the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so very quick revisiting of our conversation. We had this conversation, 6 hours ago. Was this game really going to matter? I think we both agreed, it doesn't mean nothing, but it doesn't mean everything or anything close to everything. Coming off of this, gosh, see, this is why it's so tough, and why I think as a fan, I don't know that I'm in either any of us are in a good position to really say definitively, because I'm sitting here and I'm feeling these vibes, and I want to think that the players are feeling the same thing, that same level of hype and, all of the emotions, yes, we got it. 2 in a row, 2 great wins in a row. But, these are also professional athletes. This is a business to them. And are they feeling the same things as us? We don't know. Again, it's tough for me to watch a game like that and think that the rest of the season is just whether them going, 6-12 down the stretch is the same thing as them going 12-6, and them getting the 9th seed and losing a tough game in the play-in is not different than them getting the 6th seed and not having to play that and being able to call themselves a playoff team for the first time in however many years. I don't where so I think I'm kind of reverting a little bit from my position earlier in the podcast. Where are you at? You're more steady than me, Jeremy. Where are you at?
I'm fine. I think that, look, when you look at the standings, the Knicks have a 6-game cushion in between where they're at and where the Raptors are. And so when you just look at that baseline of 18 games, you'd have to really shit the bed in order for the Raptors to lap you. So I'm feeling good. But again, it's what is the goal here? Is the goal to finish 7th or 8th? Is it to finish 6th? Is it to finish 4th or 5th? I think the answer is pretty clear. Getting to that 4th seed, 5th seed category, that's where you really want to be. So this was vital, but it also, to me, it kind of raised the floor. And it kept the ceiling open a little bit more, too, in terms of what this team can be. Because, just looking with this win, the Knicks are now only 2 games back of Atlanta for the 5th seed. 1 game back of being tied with Miami. Atlanta for the 4th seed, 1 game back with Miami. And also Charlotte's tied with Miami. And Boston is, they don't have the same record, but they're mathematically tied. So it's all this great cluster, and you've got Indiana right behind. So this was a crucial win in the sense that I would have felt confident that the Knicks could move on to that play-in tournament. But this really kind of recertified those feelings.
Well said. Also, you get to go first this week for the predictions.
That I do.
I'll read the schedule. Hang on one sec. Let me pull up our trusty spreadsheet here. Okay, we have tomorrow or today, as you're listening to this, versus LA at home, 2 road games, New Orleans and Dallas, and then Sunday 1 p.m. At home. Is that New Orleans again? Yeah, I guess that's New Orleans again. Okay, so 4 games. Go for it.
I'm going to say 2-2. I think it's a safe baseline.
Fuck all the way off. 3-1. And that is all she wrote. And on that note, we're gonna wrap this one up real quick because Jeremy needs to go to bed because he is a trooper. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining. Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
I think the walls are moving. I've been up for 18 hours, and the 4 hours I was able to sleep was just in and out. I was saying to Andrew and John beforehand that I think I was dreaming in French because I was watching Call My Agent, and it kind of got through to it. I'm a mess. So this has been great. This is now my Willis Reed performance. The first part was my flu game. This is now Willis Reed. But yeah, I'm glad we could go to bed with a Knicks win.
Thank you, Jeremy. You are the man. Thank you, Andrew. You are also the man. Everybody out there, thank you for listening to another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. We love you. We love this team. And we love you. That is it. Don't forget, rate us, review us, all the things. Check out the merch store, which you could find the link to in the description to this podcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube, the description to the YouTube. And we'll be back with you another episode very soon.